Well, hello, YouTube. I wanted to do this because I've changed some format stuff and I didn't know what I wanted to make a video about. So I'm just going to start telling you guys about the new thumbnail and we'll go from there. So I did a thumbnail because when I do these Google picture things, this could be anybody's video. Basically, when I put a thumbnail of this up, at least before you always knew it was me. So I took the old screenshot of my not logo, the picture of me in the trash bag ghillie suit, and I just wrote across it in cursive Rachel's Place on a fucking thing on my phone, and I like it because I did it fast and in 5 seconds, and the signature starts out pretty good, and then like just goes to shit, and like that's how these chats go. I think that the thumbnail says everything about this place. I put the 26 kind of down in the corner where it's hidden because, like, in reality, I have the 26 there because it means some shit to me, but I have it mostly there because I couldn't just have Rachel's Place because, for whatever reason, every name on earth is already taken by a dead account or a fake account or whatever. And that's such bullshit. Like, if you're actually going to use an account, I don't care if you have a name, but like if you're never going to use it, why did you make the account and take up that name and do all of that and then follow three people and leave? I think honestly, most of that are fake fucking accounts or people's backup accounts to stalk people with. Something like that. Anyway, um, I think that this will be good for these audio ones at least. On the videos, I'm going to leave those as whatever the thumbnail YouTube generates because I think people will be more likely to click on a video than an audio only thing. And so if you like following me and like watching my stuff, know that this thumbnail that's on this video from now on will be audio only and will be a picture video like this, probably. Uh, I like having a picture of something up to talk about at least. I picked high end military knives for this because I typed in cabin knives. I had cabin typed in. And I went to type in knives and I forgot to delete cabin, so I typed in cabin knives, and that brought up interesting results. And I kind of want to make a video on that. Maybe we'll do that, but it was like all kitchen knives and shit. And like, it's not what I think of when I think of cabin knives. So I tried typing knives into Google, and it brought up gun show shit, like really bottom tier garbage. So I was like, sorry, actually, no, I skipped one. I tried typing in just knives and it brought up a bunch of kitchen knives first. So then I was like military knives and it brought up gun show bud K crap. And then I went high end military knives. That's how I got here. And like apparently Google just sucks at getting pictures of just knives. You know, maybe there's a website somebody should make. Like it's like Google image search, but it's just knives and it just randomly generates different knives. There's got to be an audience for that, right? There's so many people that like fucking blades, man. Like it's one of those things that like I don't even really know 100% why I like them, other than that I need one, and I need one a lot. And once you start needing one a lot, like you want to keep one with you, and then like the pocket ones, the folding ones, are mechanically cool. Especially like I'm playing with an out the front right now, that Benchmade that I got, and I don't know. There's something fun about a knife like this. I don't make pocket knives. I could. I have a Balisong that I started and it's sitting in pieces. Maybe I'll finish that someday. Um, but the reason I don't make folding knives is mainly because if I want a folding knife, I will go pony up some money and really buy one. When it comes to a fixed blade, no one really makes what I want. There's a few that come close. SE comes close-ish, but they don't do some of the shit that I want done. And some of the shit that I want done, the only way to do it is to do it by hand. And I think there's something to that. And my knives, it's not that like I am like a wizard at fucking making knives or whatever. It's that I grind shit like people used to. That's one thing people don't get about my knives. Everyone that handles my knives goes, wow, how does it cut so well and whatever. Like, it cuts so well because I hardened the fuck out of it and make it to be a knife to cut things with and not to like baton things with. And as a result, you can have a really, 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 really thin edge. And on my knives, I usually either do Scandi ground or convex. Most I do some other shit too, but those are my two favorites. And those edges and geometry on those lend themselves to having strong, resilient edges that last a long time, that cut like a motherfucker. Now, convex is a little bit better than the Scandi grind, in my opinion, because it's supporting that edge more. And if you are going to go really, really hard, what I like to do is to go convex and kind of beef up the edge, first off. And second off, I like to differentially harden. So whenever I harden something, I try to only heat the edge up. Like, this is a thing that, like, I've been doing this on and off since I was like 12 or 13. And I've been practicing doing differential heat treating like this with a torch in a garage with a bucket of oil since then. I'm not saying that this is the best way to heat treat knives. I'm saying to accomplish the thing that I want to accomplish, I don't think that there is a single other way to do it other than the Japanese method using clay, and I don't really like that method that much. This method was taught to me by a guy that I'm distantly related to, actually. Newt Livesey, Livesey Knives, did gun shows around here. He's distantly related to my great grandmother, and we started talking about that and became chums and whatever at a gun show. And I showed him like the first knife I made, and he started giving me tips. And one of the first tips that he gave me was, I was talking about wanting to do differential hardening because of all of this. And he says, that's a good idea, but it's a pain in the ass. And I said, is there an easier way to do it? And that's when he showed me that torch method. And basically what you do for that is you use an acetylene torch or a propane forge. You can really do either one. The acetylene torch gives you way more control, but it's a little bit more dangerous in my opinion because you have a loose torch. So you could put the torch in a vise maybe. That would work too. But the goal is the metal only changes if it is at temperature. So if you only heat your cutting edge to temperature and leave the rest of the knife relatively cool, the back side of the knife is going to be completely soft. Now, this isn't what everybody wants. If you're wanting a survival knife, you won't like this, probably. Like, Cody Lundeen wouldn't like this knife because it doesn't make sparks. And my advice to Cody Lundeen is to buy a fucking flint and steel kit if you want to make sparks. Like, I get it in an emergency, whatever, but in an emergency, if you really had to make fire, you could make sparks off the edge of this knife. Like, it's an emergency thing you're talking about, and I would not give up performance on the knife to get the ability to possibly start a fire with tinder that you won't have. And that's the other thing, is that, you know, flint and steel shit is great if you have the stuff to make it work. And there are a few natural sources of tinder that you can use to make work, but they are few and far between, and knowing how to find them is not the easiest thing in the world. And that's not most people. What I would advise is for you to carry a tinder box that you can make char cloth in, with a bunch of char cloth and a bunch of uncharred material. And the reason is char cloth is kind of sensitive, and there are things that could happen to that char box where you lose all of the char cloth. So at that point, you're probably making a fire by friction if all you have is flint and steel, and then using your box and the uncharred material to char more cloth. That's, my best advice on that kind of shit. And like, this is the stuff that, like, I design knives. That's what I do. To some extent, I make knives. And like, I'm hoping eventually to sell designs to somebody. Maybe, like, I would really love to sell stuff to Cold Steel. But what helps me in designing and making knives is having an artist eye for beauty and knowing enough about what it is we're trying to accomplish to make the proper tool for the job. And the knives that I tend to make are combat utility knives. So, what do they need to do? Well, first and foremost, they need to kill. So, this informs exactly how the knife has to be made and sharpened, in my opinion. So, I sharpen my edges, my convex edges are sharpened like swords. They are sharpened like any sword that was ever made that actually fucking worked. Like the Japanese katana is known as being the convex sword, right? Yeah. Well, all of the fucking European swords were fucking convex ground too, because it's like if you want to cut through a human being, that's the grind you use. Um, as such, I don't know why you would make a knife that isn't that way, other than cost. And if it's cost, like what K-Bar does, is your next best alternative to this. They make a thin blade, they put a grind on it, and it's nothing fancy. That's just a knife to kill people with. And like, if I was gonna make a budget thing, the budget knife I would make would be essentially that. It would be a piece of metal cut to shape by a fucking laser water jet machine, and then I would throw a Scandi grind on it. So like, I get the logic of the K-Bar, but that's not what I'm making. Like what I'm making is a modern, handmade, one of a kind sword that's made for modern combat. And the modern sword is the fighting utility knife. The other reason we do a convex edge is because of the utility part. You want a fighting utility knife to be able to utility. And what does that mean? Well, to me, in combat, the things that you might have to do are all bushcraft, pretty much. Like there's opening crates and shit like that, but all of like the important shit that you're like, oh shit, I need this knife to perform. All of that is like, hey, we are making traps in the woods. Hey, we are building a shelter in the woods. Hey, we're doing something. Like we are out in the elements somewhere because we're fighting, and now we need this utility tool. So a lot of my knives have some weird shit in them for a fighter. They have some weird shit in them for a bushcraft knife. They have some weird shit in them for whatever. It's because they're this amalgamation of everything that works. And like, I'm not saying I make the best knives in the world or whatever, but what I'm saying is no one else makes this. You can go buy a fucking K-Bar or Cold Steel from anybody. Uh, I'm hoping to eventually be making a few knives and putting them on eBay. I'm hoping to figure out some sort of way to get knives made. If I could do that, I would rather do that just because I want more people to have my stuff than just what I can make, and I can't make that many knives. So part of the weird shit about my combat knives is the grind on them, but the other part is like I have a finger choil usually on my knives now, and the whole point or purpose of that to me is because this is a fighting utility knife. That's not the best way to do anything, but on a fighting knife, you are worried about your hand going forward onto the blade. And by putting a finger groove there, you have a full inch before the blade starts. It's nice. Also, that spot that you know occupies on a fighting knife, that is the sweet spot for carving and all of that fine work and shit. So by making that a finger groove and giving you the ability to choke up, choke down, this gives you options. And options are good. And especially with this grind that I would do on, a fighting utility knife, this really makes sense to me. And a lot of people don't like finger grooves for a bunch of reasons. And the main reason that they'll tell you is because they want to hold the handle and they want the sharp spot of the knife to be right above the handle. That's because they are a bushcrafter. If they're telling you that, they are a bushcrafter. And knives are for a lot of shit other than bushcrafting. And like, yes, you could have just that bushcraft knife and that's your combat utility knife and cool. You're good to go. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the dudes that are wearing fucking skulls on their belt. That's who the knives that I make are for. And it's not, oh, I have so much experience killing people or whatever. It's, I really like knives and swords. And I sat down for a really long time and thought about what I could make that would be the modern equivalent of the the arming sword, the long sword, whatever. Because that's what I want to make. I want to make katanas and swords and shit. And just the realities of modern combat mean that those aren't made. And the realities of modern manufacturing means it's easier to make knives, and they are more effective in combat, really, because they can be carried. And like, this is my thing with like, even that cold steel gladius machete I got, that's pretty light for a sword, and you can strap it to a pack. That's about as swordy as shit's going to get in the 21st century. I made one sword that was Fine Apes sword, is the Dusick thing I made. Uh, you can see it in the knife pictures video I made. It's a 12-inch long blade with about a 6-inch long handle with a D guard. It is a short sword, and that is the kind of thing that, like, a very big knife, very small sword, that's where, like, I think the upper end of this should live. And I was wanting to make those as like a modern Bowie knife kind of a thing. Like, it can do everything that a machete can do, it can do everything a Bowie knife can do, and it can do everything that like a short sword can do. And the knuckle guard on it actually really worked well as the machete. Like, I was surprised I didn't think of that when I was making it, because I make so much stuff with the point of like using it on people. I was like, that knuckle guard will be fucking badass for sword fighting, for protecting your hand, for beating people in the face with. As it turns out, it's also rather handy at fucking protecting your hand from you know random shit in the woods while you use it as a machete. So, like, in reality, I think Fine Ape has one of the best blades that I ever made. It has a couple of quirks about it or whatever, but that was pushing my tools and abilities and technologies to the limit. I It's one of those things that, like, if I had bigger tools, it wouldn't be that big of a deal to make that. But if you saw the tools that I used to make that sword, it was not very far off from doing it next to a fucking river. Like, I'm in a garage in Oklahoma and I had real tools, but like, I didn't have any of the right tools to make something that big. Um, what else about knives? I guess this is just about knives. I might retitle this something about knives. But the other knives that I really like are like multi tools and Swiss Army knives, and I would love to like put my head to some of that, but it's one of those. It's entirely too complicated to make. If I ever did do something like that, it would be, hey, I'm gonna design this thing, and then I'm gonna figure out how to get Leatherman to make it. I like Leatherman quite a bit. I like Swiss Army knife quite a bit. Victorinox is their company name, I think. The Swiss Army knives are so weird because, like, really, like, 3 or 4 companies have made them over the years that were actually in Switzerland, and about a billion more have made them that were not. If you really want a good pocket knife, I would recommend the Victorinox Farmer. It has a saw and a knife blade and all of the standard old school Swiss Army knife tools that are really good in the field. That's the pocket knife I would buy. And I think a lot of people get very distracted by pocket knives. And in reality, like, just a Swiss Army knife is all you need. Like, a multi tool's cool. I've got a Leatherman Juice that I really like that I've had since I was a kid. Uh, I don't know. What do you think about knives? What would you want in a knife? Do you like my thoughts on knives? Um, Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching and enjoy the new thumbnail.